The lights inside Rikers Island flickered for a moment before everything went dark. The long hallway was silent except for the echo of someone's boots and the distant sound of metal doors rattling. Then came the shout, deep, panicked and sharp, followed by a loud crash. Officers scrambled through the darkness, their flashlights cutting through the smoke that had begun to fill the corridor. Inmates yelled from their cells, banging on the bars, their voices mixing into a storm of fear and chaos. Somewhere in that noise, one officer shouted, "We've got a man down." Hours earlier, the jail had already been tense. Officer Ryan Cooper had been on duty for only 3 hours, and the heat inside the block felt unbearable. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the smell of sweat, disinfectant, and old metal. Overcrowding had made every cell a pressure cooker. Small rooms meant for one now held 3 men, their mattresses pushed together on the floor. Arguments broke out daily, sometimes over food, sometimes just because someone looked the wrong way. Ryan had worked at Rikers for 7 years. He had seen fights, stabbings, and even riots, but recently, things felt different. The jail was running short on staff, and the new officers coming in were barely trained. Some days, they were outnumbered 50 to 1. "It's like walking into a lion's cage," he had told his partner, Officer Dana Miller, that morning. That same day, a rumor spread among inmates that a young man named Luis Ramos, locked up for a minor drug charge, had been beaten by another group in the showers. By the afternoon, word reached the officers, and tensions started to rise. The inmates from different blocks began shouting at each other during mealtime, and trays of food were thrown across the floor. The officers tried to calm them down, but it only took one shove before a full fight erupted. Ryan and Dana rushed in, using their shields to block punches as backup called for more units. The scene was wild, fists flying, trays breaking, and voices screaming. Ryan grabbed one man and pushed him against the wall, yelling for him to stop. But before he could catch his breath, someone threw hot soup across the room, hitting another officer in the face. It was chaos in every direction. Hours later, when calm finally returned, the warden arrived with a tight expression. "We can't keep running this place like this," he said quietly. "Too many men, too little control." But the truth was, everyone already knew it. Overcrowding had turned the jail into a boiling pot that could spill over any day. That night, when the power went out, Ryan was patrolling the upper tier of the cell block. The sound of generators dying filled the silence. "Not again," he muttered, turning on his flashlight. Below him, shadows moved, too many of them. He could hear whispers, the low rustle of feet moving fast. Somewhere nearby, a door slammed. "Control, this is Cooper. Power outage in Block C. Possible movement between cells," he said into his radio. But there was only static. Then came a scream, loud, human, and close. Ryan ran toward the sound, his flashlight shaking in his hand. He saw Dana running from the opposite side, her light cutting through the darkness. "Where's it coming from?" she shouted. Before Ryan could answer, a shadow appeared at the end of the hall. For a second, it looked like an inmate standing completely still, watching them. The smoke from the emergency generator made the air heavy, and the red backup lights began to flicker weakly back on. The man's face was half hidden, and his hands were trembling. Ryan stepped forward. "Hey, get back in your cell," he ordered. But the man didn't move. Then, in one sudden motion, he lifted something, a broken piece of metal, and there was a sound of boots rushing toward him. The officers shouted commands, the metal hit the ground, and everything turned into shouting and confusion again. And just as Ryan grabbed his radio a second time, the emergency lights failed completely, throwing them back into darkness. The sound of another crash echoed through the block, followed by silence that felt far too long. Then, from somewhere in that dark silence, came one last scream. When the lights finally flickered back on, the block looked like a scene from a nightmare. The floor was covered in overturned food trays, shredded uniforms, and pieces of broken plastic. Water leaked from a busted pipe, spreading across the floor like a silver river under the emergency lights. Ryan's heart was pounding as he swept his flashlight across the hallway. Dana knelt beside Officer Grant, the one who had been hit during the chaos, pressing a towel against his bleeding shoulder. "Stay with me," Dana said, her voice steady but trembling slightly. Ryan grabbed his radio. Control, this is Block C, officer down. We need medical and backup, now. Static. No response. The control tower hadn't reconnected. He smacked the radio once, hoping to catch a signal, but all he got was dead air and the hum of the flickering lights above. From the cells around them came a rising noise, the sound of inmates shouting, clanging, laughing. Some taunted the officers, others begged for help. Rikers Island was coming alive again after the blackout, but not in a good way. Ryan looked toward the end of the corridor. Something felt wrong. A door that should have been locked, the one leading to the Bing, the isolation unit, was slightly open. He motioned to Dana. We can't stay here. We need to check that block before this spreads. She nodded, still pressing on Grant's shoulder. Go. I'll hold here. Ryan stepped carefully through the flooded floor, his boots making small splashes. As he moved closer to the Bing, the air grew heavy, thick with dust and the smell of metal. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness. The isolation doors were wide open, every single one. The cells were empty. Then a faint sound came from behind him, a voice, soft and shaky. Wait. It was Luis Ramos, the young inmate from earlier. His face was pale under the dim light. You shouldn't go in there, he said quietly. They're not gone. They're hiding. Ryan frowned. Who's hiding? Luis swallowed hard. The ones who started the fight. They said they'd finish what they started tonight. Ryan looked back toward the open block. His instincts screamed that Luis was telling the truth. He raised his flashlight higher and stepped inside. The silence inside the Bing was unnatural, too deep, too still. He could hear only the slow drip of leaking water and the faint buzz of the light above. As he turned a corner, his beam landed on something lying on the ground, a torn piece of blue fabric. A uniform sleeve. He crouched and picked it up. There was a name tag still attached, S. Collins. One of the guards assigned to isolation. Then came the sound, metal scraping against metal. Ryan whipped his flashlight toward it. At the far end of the hall, 3 shadows moved. They weren't running, they were walking slowly, side by side. Stop right there. Ryan shouted, voice echoing. No answer. One of the shadows stepped into the light. It was a tall man with tattoos crawling up his neck, his orange jumpsuit half torn. Behind him were 2 more inmates, one carrying a broom handle snapped in half like a weapon. Ryan gripped his flashlight tighter. Put that down. The tall man smiled faintly, eyes cold. We just want to talk, he said. Ryan didn't move. You attacked an officer. That's not talking. The man's voice turned sharp. You think we wanted this? You think we like being packed in like animals? No light, no air, no help. You people don't care. None of you. Ryan's pulse thudded in his ears. He didn't have a taser, he had dropped it earlier during the blackout. We can fix this, he said, trying to sound calm. But not like this. The inmate stepped closer, his face twisting with frustration. Fix it? They've been saying that for years. Look around, officer, nothing's fixed. Behind him, the second inmate, shorter, angrier, shouted, The guards eat better than us. We ain't got clean water half the time. Ryan could see it now, desperation more than hatred. These men weren't monsters. They were trapped in a broken place. But desperation could turn dangerous fast. Suddenly, Dana's voice echoed from the corridor behind him. Ryan, step back. He turned just as she appeared, her taser raised. The inmates froze. The tall one clenched his fists, eyes darting between them. The tension hung in the air like a drawn bowstring. Then came the distant sound of boots, more officers arriving. The inmates realized it too. Their chance was over. The tall one dropped the broom handle, his voice low. You can cage us again, he said, but you can't stop what's coming. Within seconds, backup flooded the hall. Commands filled the air. On the ground, hands behind your back. The inmates were tackled and restrained, the noise bouncing off the steel walls until it was all over. Ryan stood still, breathing heavily. The lights stopped flickering. The power was fully restored. But something inside him didn't feel settled. Later, in the warden's office, the air was heavy with silence. The warden rubbed his forehead, staring at the report Ryan handed him. "Another riot," he said softly. "Third one this month." Dana leaned against the wall, exhausted. "It's getting worse. The cells are packed. Some guys sleep in shifts because there's no space for beds." The warden sighed. "The city knows. The mayor's office wants reform, smaller jails, more community programs. But until that happens, Rikers is still ours to keep from falling apart." Ryan looked out the small window toward the dark East River. Beyond it, the city lights sparkled, full of life and movement. A different world. "People out there don't know what it's really like inside," he said quietly. "They just hear the headlines." The warden nodded slowly. "That's why we talk about reform. But words aren't enough anymore." As dawn crept in, painting the gray walls pale gold, Ryan walked back down the corridor toward the main block. The noise of inmates starting another day rose around him, shouting, laughing, calling for attention. He paused at one cell and saw Luis Ramos sitting quietly on his bunk, reading a torn paperback. When Luis noticed him, he lifted his eyes and said softly, "They'll try again, you know." Ryan didn't answer. He just nodded and walked on. Outside, the morning shift was coming in. Another day, another cycle. Nothing had changed, but everything felt heavier. In the distance, a siren wailed, echoing across the island, a reminder that Rikers never really slept. And deep down, Ryan knew the truth. The violence wasn't just about anger. It was a message. A warning that the system was breaking, and time was running out to fix it.